Howdy folks, Nathan here with a present. That's right, this is something that you guys get to unwrap. Basically, while you're watching, I get to have a good time, everybody's happy. This is the 2023 Polaris Slingshot, and it is somewhat new. In 2019, they completely redid the vehicle, including the powertrain. We're gonna cover that in a second. And now it's a very different vehicle, but I've driven many. However, I have not driven them in Southern California. And the question is it like flying? A lot has changed since 2019. Mainly the powertrain and an awful lot of components on the outside, but there are some other things I want to show you. In terms of the powertrain, it's now putting out 203 horsepower, 144 pound-feet of torque, and that's coming through a 2-liter Polaris engine, 4-cylinder, under the hood, in the front, not in the back. People mistake it that often, and they shouldn't. There have been a lot of changes on the interior as well, and a lot of that has to do with comfort. Believe it or not, this is a more comfortable car. Yeah, I called it a car. It's an auto cycle, big deal. Here's the beginning. All new steering wheel. This came out a couple years ago. Flat bottom for big fat guys like me, but also very comfortable steering. Actually, this is one of my favorite components in here. The car handles great. I've mentioned that before, but this is nice. It's rewarding to the touch. But there's more. 7-inch screen here, very decent infotainment system. Basically, Apple CarPlay. You do have to plug in everything. It's not wireless, but you also have this. And this is really, really big for an awful lot of you. This means that anybody can drive this. As long as you wear a helmet in the state of California and some other states, you can drive this machine even if you can't drive a manual transmission, because this is an automated manual transmission. So there's a 5-speed manual, basically from a Mazda Miata, which works quite well, which you can get with this, and I love it. But this, well, all you have to do is either put it in drive or reverse, and it'll go in that direction. But it's still a manual transmission, it's automated. So it's actually shifting gears and moving around. And then there's a servo that's actually making things happen based on the vehicle's algorithm as you're driving. It figures it out, and it does it in a very efficient way. However, to be honest with you, in stop and go traffic, it ain't too happy. Now, since they put the system in here a few years ago, they have been updating it every year. And the good news is, for those people who bought one of these with the earlier version of this transmission, they can actually go for free to Polaris and update that transmission. I'm sorry about the helmet, but I am in the state of California, and the state of California insists on this, so this is the best I can do. And so it's going to be muffled. But I wanted to tell you just a couple quick things about this. First of all, the ride is not as horrible as you might think, even though the suspension is very tight. But it is not in any way, shape, or form a car. Don't think of this as a car when it comes to suspension. Think of it as a motorcycle that is very easy to drive, and then you'll be a lot happier. Another very important component of this vehicle is the fact that if you're going through an area that has a lot of potholes, you will not be able to avoid all of them. Okay, with that being said, a couple more things I wanted to bring up. It handles quite well. The rear is a little bit light, so if you're used to a Miata or even a Mustang or anything else, you have to keep in mind that you are going to have some issues going around a corner if you think that you hit the accelerator and it's going to do the same thing. It won't. Steering is quite nice. Actually, there's some decent feedback and feel. It's got a great weight to it too. Feels better than the last one I drove. The automated manual transmission, not happy in stop and go traffic, but it's very happy when you're going through the twisties and you're trying to do a little bit of performance driving. So it is something that I think is a lot of fun, and oh yeah, it responds relatively quick. It's as if somebody who is kind of slow is actually shifting through the gears. This is one of those cars that really does bond to you when you throw it around the corners, but it is not meant for day-to-day driving. And I would be really interested to meet somebody who actually uses it as a daily driver. That would be really interesting. Once again, I do have to wear a helmet here in the state of California, but there are places where you do not have to. It is an auto cycle. As such, in some places, it's completely okay not to wear a helmet. I'm not saying do it, of course, you know, safety first. But that's true, right? Oh, I love the way this thing corners. It's so wide when you go around a corner, you forget about how short it is. Unusual dimensions. Oh, and the brakes are absolutely outstanding. One issue is if you go over a bunch of bumps and potholes and stuff like that, the rear end can lift up in the air. You can lose traction, and the minute you lose traction, you'll feel it in the steering as well. Interesting stuff. It's a hoot. Remember when I was talking about flying and how this vehicle perhaps does feel a little bit like flying? Part of it has to do with this unusual fender design. Now, I know the car is gaudy. Look, we all agree on that. Not only that, but the materials, I mean, this is basically stuff that you'd use in a side-by-side. Completely fine because it's very durable and it does its thing, and who cares about, you know, what other people think, because kids on the street love this. But going back to the flying thing, from the cockpit, as you're driving, these sort of feel like wings. And it is kind of cool because you're sitting so low to the ground. I mean, a BMW X5 looked like a semi-truck to me as I was driving. It was right next to me and I flew around it. So a little bit of flying going on there. Another thing is that because of these large openings, you're actually able to see your front wheel, at least the left front wheel, from the driver's seat. Now, that's pretty good for placement, but you have to keep in mind something. This is not a narrow vehicle by any stretch of the imagination. What do I mean by that? Well, it's very important to think about, the Chevy Corvette, the new one. This is actually 1 inch wider than a 2023 Corvette Stingray. That's right, but it's a lot shorter, and it only has one wheel back there. So handling, completely different. If you're looking for the most positive and then the negative aspect of this vehicle in terms of driving, it all comes down to this. Look at this. This is, now bear in mind, this is the R, so this has the wider tire. It's 11 inches wide. That is pretty good contact, but for those of you who are used to driving a sports car, you might want 2 of these, one over there, maybe one over here. Another thing that some of you may be wary about is the fact that there is a belt here, basically as if you're driving a motorcycle. See how it comes through, wraps around the sprocket, and one shock. What that means is that when you're going around a corner, this is always flat. There is no flexing. If you had 2 wheels, there'd be a lot more flex in the vehicle. And I'm not talking about in a negative way, I'm talking about in a positive way. So if I'm flying around a corner and really pushing it, this gets light. And if I go through a bump when it's happening, yeah, I can lose traction and it upsets the whole apple cart. Fortunately, this vehicle is super light, it's like 1,700 pounds. And because of that, it is very easy to control, provided that you don't go too crazy. Now we have some old video of Paul going around the track and really punishing one of these, but that was an older one. This, well, it's different, and it can be a handful if you don't know what you're doing. Do you like my stance? This is my superhero stance, just like Captain What's-His-Name. This car does make you feel a little bit like a special person, kind of sort of like a superhero, but at the same time, you're kind of an idiot driving around because you are under everybody, and there are an awful lot of people out there like, why didn't you get a Miata? In fact, that's going to be the main question. So why this over a Miata? Well, honestly speaking, it's not price, because these start, the S, the base model, which just came back at about 20 grand, and they can easily match and then go over the Mazda Miata's price, yes. But this is something that if you're a motorcycle freak and you like being really close to the ground, you can touch the ground as you're driving, which I don't recommend. This is the vehicle for you. If you want a little bit of a feeling of flight, of actually moving around and doing something different than everybody else on the road, this is your car. And if you want to be like a superhero and show the world that you are macho, get a Harley. Sorry, this is a great car too, but the point is that it is a lot of fun, and fun is what I'm all about. At the end of the day, if you want something fun, silly, and just a little ridiculous, think about this. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time. I wanted to throw out a special thank you to Motoman Studios for helping us out and providing an amazing space to film this, and of course, to Polaris.